Hi, guys, it's Michael from the Bonus Situation Podcast. For this episode, Boomer and I discuss the infamous BBC classic Threads. Just a heads up, the film contains upsetting imagery and an instance of sexual assault. I still recommend the movie, but please watch it on your own time when you feel is best for you. Now, please, I hope you enjoy this episode.
You might be out playing at home when the warning comes. But what has happened to the city's hospitals?
Well, how in the world do you expect me to eat? Do you want me to starve to death?
Bury the body for the time being in a trench and mark the spot as a burial.
I think we ought to discuss the bonus situation.
Right.
So, Boomer, why is Threads your favorite family comedy?
Well, basically, it boils down to this, right? You got a little bit of romance, you got a little bit of the young and the old, and you got nuclear hellfire. It's just, everything that you would expect to be in a movie of that caliber. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. No, personally, there's nothing more. There's nothing else I would like to do more besides watching Threads with an audience full of elderly people who haven't yet been traumatized. I think that would just be so wonderful.
I know, right?
Oh boy. So in this episode, we are talking about the BBC Two classic Cold War film, Threads. And just curious, Boomer, if you weren't paranoid about nuclear warfare, do you think this movie would do the trick?
Most definitely. I mean, most people have probably heard of the concept of nuclear warfare, via popular media, like things like Fallout or what have you. We all understand nuclear warfare as a concept, but to really truly understand what it means to be in nuclear warfare and to deal with, more specifically, the aftermath of nuclear warfare, I don't think there's any piece of media that covers that quite as well as this, right? Like just how dismal of a picture it really paints. It puts shit into perspective. That's what I'll say.
I mean, would you say that nuclear warfare is la good or la bad after watching this movie?
Why? I think it is le good. No. In all honesty, I think anyone that watches this, it's pretty clear that they're trying to say that this is the worst possible thing that could ever happen to humanity. And I was just left feeling like, holy shit, that was insane. Nuclear warfare is like literally the end of humanity as we know it. And that is very much lay bad.
Yeah, so I wanted to pick this after Strangelove just because Strangelove is definitely very concerned with nuclear warfare, but it is depicting all of this stuff in the abstract. It is the moments leading up to and none of the moments after of. So how do you think, just, before we get into the meat of this episode, how do you think those two compare?
So you kind of have at the beginning these feelings of mass panic, because it's the ensuing threat of a nuclear war about to begin, and you have people running into the stores and running out carrying carts full of crap, and you have families that are panicking and shoving their crap into their cars, people fighting over things, chaos, like literally COVID-19 pandemic during the 2020s, and just everyone going nuts and not knowing what to do, and the government's communications being obscured and miscommunicated. And you have that to the ultimately what the producers of the movie are saying is the result of nuclear warfare, where we don't really know what that would be, but we can only assume that society is pretty much fragmented. Everything that we once had is now suddenly gone, and people are surviving on the scraps of what little there is left from civilization. And anyone born in this time is completely uneducated and, might as well be a caveman, like literally a caveman. And it's really scary, the idea that after a nuclear warfare, your education system and the way you bring people up into the world is just gone, and society as we know it has failed. It ceases to exist.
I gotta tell you, the most shocking scene in this movie is when the dogs were mating with cats.
Oh no. Yes, that did happen in the movie. I forgot about that. And that was, yeah, if that doesn't tell you how fucked up nuclear warfare is, just imagine that. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Severin snuck that in for the re-release. Maybe it was some old archive footage, but that was a very disturbing scene.
Yes, to all you cat lovers out there, imagine. Just imagine.
The post-nuclear future.
The post-nuclear future.
Fallout ain't got shit on this movie, apparently.
Nope.
Yeah. But hey, man, shall I jump into the plot summary, get people caught up on what happens in Threads before we really dive into it?
Hey, take it away, man.
The year is 1984. Disco is dead, but video games, cocaine, and Betamax cassettes are like so totally in right now. In the UK, two young adults named Jimmy and Ruth are having the segs in the car and later decide to get married. Meanwhile, the US and Russia decide to just fuck already after tensions over a coup in Iran escalate. Soon after, while Jimmy is shopping around and not cheating on his currently pregnant fiancée, a nuclear intercontinental ballistic missile airbursts in southern England near their town. After the explosion, Jimmy is regrettably less alive than he used to be. Jimmy's entire family, minus his mum and dad, are also dead. Ruth's family fares slightly better, but much like last year's iPhone, slightly better isn't good enough. Pretty soon, Ruth is wandering around post-apocalyptic Sheffield as society collapses and martial law is declared by Sheffield's crossing guards. Even later on in the movie, after the narrator bounces out of the film, Ruth gives birth to a perfectly fine baby daughter. She's totally not sterile. Everything's fine. Ruth Jr. grows up plowing the field and eventually starts running with a teenage gang to get basic foodstuffs. Eventually, she also has the segs with another totally fine teenage boy and gives birth to a dead baby 9 months later. That's all, folks. That's Threads.
Another thing to note here, it is not really clear whether the segs at the end there was consensual or not. Just something to
yes.
keep in mind.
Yeah, that's just one of the many charming details in this movie is not only does Law and Order completely break down, but so does consent towards the end of it. I mean, the way this is shot, they do a very, good job of not presenting this as like a really sexy thing. It's not exploitative. It's just very disturbing.
And that was the goal, after all, to leave you with a feeling of being disturbed.
Yeah, I mean, Boomer, we did a lot of joking, but how did you like this movie? I made you watch it, right? I mean, how did it make you feel?
Well, initially, I thought it was just going to be a typical, where you have a narrative and it has a story where it follows the same characters from the beginning to the end. But this movie had this weird sort of, it was almost like a documentary where a lot of the time it was just footage of the aftermath. There was really no one talking. It was just this very depressing scene of collapsed buildings and people struggling to survive and get their things together and lift people out from under the scrap of debris. And by the end there, it was just a lot of the original characters you started with were no longer there. It was just people that remained. And so it kind of shifted from this, you have your main characters, they have these relationships, are in the setting, to now that setting is gone and totally just messed up beyond all belief. And now your characters, you don't really know what's going on completely. It's hard to tell who's who and what's happening. but I think that's done on purpose because it starts off making sense, and then all of a sudden everything just goes to shit, and you're feeling scared for these characters because they're in these, it's almost like it's in this microcosm where, like, in one scene they're trapped in the basement, all the scientists and engineers are preparing for nuclear war, and they're in this basement and the lights are going out and they're trying to communicate with everybody, and you just really feel like you're there with them, like, oh my god, this sucks. Like, you're not there with your family, you're just trapped in here, and then all of a sudden everything just, goes kaboom, and then you're buried under a ton of concrete, and what do you do in that situation? So it was very disturbing seeing that thematic shift from a typical movie narrative to this weird documentary with a very dismal view.
Yeah, I mean, Threads is very subtle. I think you and I were even discussing just how many details could be overlooked and missed. I mean, dude, this is like my third time watching this film. And unless you're unless you're going through the plot with like a fine-toothed comb, it's hard to decipher exactly what triggers the nuclear exchange that is presented in the movie.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can totally see from the news clippings and the news broadcast that there's specific events that you can kind of stitch together and make a timeline, but it really isn't clear what the last straw is. It just kind of comes out of nowhere. The Russians are invading the UK, and
Yes.
you're like, oh shit
Stinky.
started.
Stinky.
Stinky.
Yeah. I would say, for any of you who have been to the movies recently and seen Weapons, much like Weapons is a exploration of a community struggling to solve a problem, Threads is a examination of British institutions, and basically the film's thesis questions whether or not the advice given to the British public was actually adequate enough to prepare people for a actual nuclear exchange. Dude, we were talking about the TV commercials earlier from the film. What'd you think of those?
So it's funny you mention it because you see a lot of like analog horror stuff today on YouTube and what have you. And these commercials used in the movie remind me so much of that, or so much of what the analog horror is trying to convey.
If anyone dies while you are kept in your fallout room, move the body to another room in the house.
But the thing is that it's real, right? Or, real as far as we know. And it's truly disturbing. Like the one was, if anybody in your party dies, take their body to another room and close the door. Like, imagine that, if you're in that situation and you have to follow this advice because that's, or even if you're not in that situation, just to be told by the news anchor, take the body, put it in another room. Like, that is so surreal and disturbing.
Matter-of-factly.
Yeah.
Just very almost coldly. Like, what's interesting about the narration in this movie is just how much it resembles the narration that was given to people. Like, I want to see one of them, I think it was called, maybe it was like Protect and Seek or something like that. But basically, it was called Protect and Survive. It was a segment aired by the BBC that was doing exactly what you just described. The whole intention of this program is we're going to give people practical advice in a very matter-of-fact, step-upper-lip fashion. If your grandmother is found deceased, bury her out back. It's not even that emotional. It's colder than what I just sounded like. I mean, it's nightmare fuel.
Absolutely. Nightmare fuel is very accurate.
Yeah. And, as far as this movie goes, so much of it actually, like, so much of the sound clips, the advice they're pulling from in this movie, all of this stuff wasn't created especially for this film. They were just pulling from public resources. I mean, Boomer, you said that Threads is almost like a cross between a movie and a documentary. I mean, what led you to that conclusion?
So a lot of it is kind of the stylistic choices of the way they filmed it. Like the beginning of the scene, you have a lot of close-up shots, very intimate, that kind of show relationships between the characters. And then it sort of turns into these like panoramic shots and wide shots where you're looking at large, well, I guess large settings, and you're seeing the aftermath of the nuclear hellfire. And there's a lot of there's a lot less dialogue, aside from the narrator chiming in to say 500 megatons of nuclear bomb or whatever. And it's like as if a film crew was just going through a war zone and just depicting things that were going on, very, very much like we see in the news today. And it's less about it being a movie and just more or less being, this is what reality would look like if there was a nuclear bomb that went off. And there's no it's not drama, it's just raw footage and cold hard facts. And it very much has that toward the latter half of the movie.
Yeah, and I glossed over a lot of this in my kind of funny plot summary of the film, but it's taking that matter of factness and it's applying to people with actual relationships and loved ones, and it's sort of forcing the audience to confront like what the human costs of this looks like.
Yeah.
And this entire movie is just a really, really bad thing happening to more or less ordinary people. I mean, dude, what'd you think about the casting in this film? I mean, this is something that we haven't necessarily discussed, but like none of these people are big names.
No, they're not. But I think that kind of plays to the benefit of the movie, because if you had some big name actor in there, you would think of this more as like, oh, like a action movie, or like how I survived the nuclear hellfire and saved the day. Like you're not going for like a stereotypical, movie here. This is, you want characters that that aren't immediately recognizable. They just seem like normal humans, and you don't put a name to the face, and that's just what you want. They're just people to you watching this movie, right? Ordinary people. So that way, when things go south, you feel the ultimate emotional backlash of seeing these bad things happen to them and seeing their loved ones die. And I think it's necessary for the effect of this movie that you don't really know who these actors are. They just put on a very solid portrayal of people in this situation, and it was cast well. That's what I'll say, put it bluntly.
Yeah, so one thing that was mentioned in the Svervin Releases documentary featuring a British film historian by the name of Stephen Thrower, Mick Jackson, the director of Threads, made a very purposeful decision to cast unknowns, like local people in Sheffield, the community that's featured in this movie. He specifically avoided major actors or celebrities. In fact, at one point there was a decision that was being floated around for Threads where there was a very famous British sitcom. I want to say it was called Downing Street or something like that. The name escapes me. And it's basically, Threads could have been like if we were to make this movie in America, it wouldn't hit the same if you were watching this happen to the cast of like The Big Bang Theory. You know, it just wouldn't.
No, absolutely not.
So again, you know, having people who are just kind of plucked off the street to inhabit these roles, it's something where like you won't notice it, but your brain will.
Yeah. It's subtle. It's subtlety. The movie is all about subtlety.
Yeah. Just again, there are so many little aspects of the production that are just really meant to kind of dig at you. You know, to kind of like I guess hack the way you see things. You know, this is something that like is very small. It's very little, but Alfonso Cuarón in Children of Men, and pardon me, Boomer, I am skipping ahead a little bit, but you know, in the movie Children of Men, Alfonso Cuarón gives a lot of the characters in that movie pets. And what do we see in Threads, Boomer?
We see a lot of pets. A
That
lot
are-
of animals. A lot of cute animals.
Yes.
Dying.
Yeah, so like even if you can't necessarily relate to the characters, you know, everyone's had a cat or a dog or, you know, even like a goldfish or something. You know, I think we all get sad when our pets die. And Mick Jackson really uses that to an advantage in this movie.
Yeah, one scene in particular that I remember was when they were trying to pack up their car and leave the main family, and they were looking for their dog and they couldn't find the dog, and it just stressed me out so much, the thought of leaving my own pet behind, right? And just knowing that it's still there and that something could happen to it and it's not in the safety of the car. I mean, it was totally unnerving.
Yeah, and dude, it really took me. It took me basically the third time watching this, but that same family, you know, we follow them trying to get out of the city, and later on, I want to say it's Jimmy's parents who are just kind of having a right old time of it after the nukes fall down, and Jimmy's dad hears screaming outside of the house. That family who's looking for their dog, they totally die off screen.
Yeah. Dang. Yeah,
Like
you're
the
right.
movie, it doesn't tell you this. It doesn't stop to say these people are dead. It's just the sound design in this is really on point.
Agreed.
Yeah, but you know, just curious. I think you and I both mutually kind of connected this to COVID-19. You know, what led you to that train of thought watching Threads?
It's once the conflict between US and Russia depicted in the movie really escalates and people really begin to think that nuclear war is imminent and they begin to panic. Keyword is panic there, because I remember specifically when COVID-19, when it first became a national crisis and people were flocking to the grocery stores, and you know, things like toilet paper and hand sanitizer and other expendable goods were just flying off the shelves to the point where you couldn't even get that stuff, right? Even if you really needed it, people were stockpiling and fighting, and it was just chaos, and no amount of government telemessaging telling people to remain calm and act orderly could really solve the issue. And we get the same behavior from the characters in the movie, and it just felt so relatable. And to think that, wow, that was only during a mass pandemic. Imagine how people might act during a nuclear war, or the onset of a nuclear war, how much worse it could be, or how much more chaotic and violent things would get.
Yeah, I mean, one of the scenes that really stood out in this movie is this one elderly woman who's shopping for canned goods at the grocery store, and she's got the credit card out. She's outraged at how much everything is costing in this supermarket. And when news of the nuclear exchange first hits this town, everyone just decides, oh, this money that we've been using, yeah, this doesn't mean shit anymore. And she just books it out of the store. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of relatable.
Oh, absolutely. And another note that you just reminded me of is kind of toward the end of the movie, there's people that are flocking to the military depots where they stockpiled all the bread and all the food supplies, and people are busting down through the gate and getting shot by the soldiers guarding it. And this kind of alludes, in my opinion, to how people are, at least during COVID-19, people were struggling to get the vaccine, right? You had the people that were lucky enough to get the Johnson & Johnson one. And then slowly but surely, the other companies were starting to release their vaccine, and more people.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, ahead, dude. Alternatives came out. We had more options. But I think you are dead on the money when you talk about that initial Johnson & Johnson wave.
Mm-hmm. Like, people were flocking to that thing. Like, if you got it, you were like, that was the golden ticket. And I'm not saying people were like, getting shot in an attempt to get the vaccine, but I think the level of push and the desire and people anxiously awaiting that definitely is what it felt like when the vaccine first rolled out.
Yeah, I mean, dude, even just beyond like the vaccine, even just basic cost of living supplies. When I was working at Trader Joe's, folks who had been there during 2020 spoke of the panic buying like I've heard veterans talk about their time in Iraq. Like, this was really traumatizing to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I, like I said before, I can't imagine how people would react during threat of nuclear war. I mean, it's terrifying, the idea of a whole society being at the whim of something completely out of its control.
One of the more interesting background aspects to this movie concerns just all of the products that were being sold in the 1980s that alleged to help protect people from a nuclear incident, right? You had these really high-end fallout shelters. I mean, hell, you still have these being sold to folks, right? You had survival kits. Like I think the funniest thing about Threads is, you and I, we're both, young dudes, but watching this movie, it really gave me the impression that nothing has really ever changed,
No, I mean, again, commercialism is commercialism, right? Technology changes and opinions change and fads come and go. But at the end of the day, the new microwave 5000 to turn your kitchen into a 5-star restaurant. It's the same product, right? That might have existed in the 80s, but it's the same. It's the same thing AI today. Whereas instead of,
it's got AI in it, Boomer. The AI is going to tell you exactly how long your baked beans need to sit in the microwave to get cooked correctly. So
yeah, there you go.
So that way, when you sit down to watch Cars 2 in your living room, like you do, you can enjoy baked beans at the AI optimal temperature.
The AI determines how to cook beans properly. No more having to guess how long to put it in the microwave and just ended up with a nuked thing of beans. You get perfectly made chef kiss beans. Like, literally, it's the same thing, just instead of it being like some like weird retro 80s commercial. It's AI.
I mean, look, to be fair, if I had a choice between dying horribly of radiation poisoning and, dying also of radiation poisoning, but while watching Cars 2 and eating baked beans in a bunker, I don't know. I mean, one's definitely an easier death, but, it's not like it's going to save you, right?
Yeah. Which reminds me, let's talk about Cars 2.
Hey, that episode's coming up
one day.
Be careful, Boomer. I'm going to add it to the
Put
roster.
it on your calendars. Right behind Marmaduke.
Dude, I mean, I this is a slight tangent, but we might actually have to examine all of those like kind of bad kids movies, but with the one CGI talking animal. I think, we could even build it into a theme. You know what movie takes place in the UK, Boomer? Garfield 2, A Tale of Two Kitties from 2006. The peak of Kino. We could have just shut down the Oscars then and there, man.
Absolutely, we could have.
But, considering that we both grew up in and around military bases, did Threads hit home for you in any special way?
It definitely did, Michael, because there's one scene I remember where what's the young boy's name? That we see at the beginning when they're having the zeg. When you see Michael, right? They're on their family farm, right? And you see a jet taking off in the background, and just that like extreme juxtaposition with the military base. It's just that did hit home because I remember seeing helicopters and Chinooks and jets and things like that taking off. Soldiers walking around with guns, and that was just like not an unusual sight. It was just kind of like part of
growing up on a military base. You're gonna see the tanks and the MRAPs and the dudes with the rifles. It's just everyday life.
Yeah, and to think that that's just what you experience, and for them that was just there goes the 9 o'clock jet. Hello jets.
Hello
or
tanks.
hello tanks. Hello
jets.
Whatever.
Hello more tanks.
Yeah. I guess that's all there really is to say about that, is that it's definitely a familiar sight, seeing military vehicles and military personnel to those that are initiated into that type of thing. But I definitely am glad they included that
Boomer,
in the movie.
I think for me, it reminded me that, these things can and are threatening to people, I mean, like whether or not we like it, what happens on military bases is sometimes, kind of scary,
Yeah, especially when you're not totally in the loop on things, it can most certainly be scary. Like things that you don't understand or things that are obscure, it just casts kind of a shadow of doubt on everything around you. And, without someone like coming up front and saying, hey, this is what's going on, or like, trying to include the civilian population in the local operations outside of things that are, top secret or classified. I think that definitely does, a good service to the community to kind of say, hey, this is what we're doing. It's no harm to anyone. It's just training, or this is the intended purpose of this operation, rather than just being this like elusive presence that no one really knows what happens. And yeah, I could totally understand the perspective of someone living in Sheffield in this movie and seeing this omnipresent force there, and the camouflage and the weird vehicles and the sounds of gunfire and explosions. It's definitely ominous.
Hey, speaking of things that were ominous, I really have to tell you about what was happening in the UK and, really globally in 1984. So,
hit me with it.
just for context for people who like me weren't around in England in 1984, but unlike me, who don't have the super duper special Blu-ray or whatever, Threads came out in a year, in an era really where we don't have as much information as we do now. Threads debuted on BBC Two in a time where there were only 4 BBC channels. So odds are, if you were, in England during this time, you had a really good chance of spotting this movie. And when this comes out in the height of, I mean, look, when Threads comes out, nuclear paranoia and the Cold War it's a scary time. It's a really scary time. I mean, look, Ronald Reagan has been president for 4 years. Margaret Thatcher has just been elected prime minister in 1979. And there are some really scary things that happen in the early 80s, right? So I would just real quick like to talk to you about one of the greatest of all times, one of the goats of the Cold War. It's not Reagan. It's not Thatcher. It's not some ghoul from the Heritage Foundation. I'm talking about Stanislav Petrov. This man was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Union's air defense forces. And, he's at his computer, right? And we don't have a lot of these in the 1980s, but he's sitting at a little monitor showing him radar. Now, Boomer, typically, you know a little bit more about chain of command than I do, but what happens when you're given an item to escalate in the chain of command?
Well, if a subordinate comes up to you with an item and you can't handle it at your level, and you've exhausted all options that you have available to you at your level, you communicate that by whatever necessary means to the next level of authority until they can solve it. That's how that goes.
Petrov does an interesting thing. He's looking at his radar under the orders that if you spot any irregularities or anything that could be a nuclear explosion or something like that, you escalate it. You pass it up the chain. And who do you think was above the train? Above the chain, above Petrov?
Let's see. I'm not sure who was above Petrov. I'm not exactly sure.
Well, truth be told, I'm not entirely sure exactly who was above Petrov, but at the very tippy top of that chain that Petrov was supposed to escalate to were guys with their fingers on the button. We're talking about the bomb, Dimitri.
Yes.
Bomb. And if anything were to go wrong with the bomb...
Well, if anything were to go wrong with the bomb, I think we would all be doomed.
So,
absolutely
Stanislav
doomed.
Petrov, we're doomed. Yes. So Petrov, fearing that he may be looking at a false positive, which he was actually looking at a peculiar cloud formation on the radar. He decided not to escalate this radar report. And he very well might have saved the lives of a great deal many people. He was later quoted saying there was no rule about how long we were allowed to think before we reported a strike. We knew that every second of procrastination took away valuable time, that the Soviet Union's military and political leadership needed to be informed without delay. All I had to do was reach for the phone to raise the direct line to our top commanders, but I couldn't move. I felt like I was sitting on a hot frying pan.
That's insane. To think that a suspicious cloud formation resulted in someone sending the jet carrying a 500 megaton nuclear payload. That's literally one person in a phone call was the difference between nuclear hellfire and nothing happening, or us living in this timeline as we know it. That's unimaginable. I mean, what was going through his head? Like, probably this has to be 100% legit before I even so much as think of calling it in. I mean, the hot frying pan analogy seems spot on to me. Like your ass is just on fire, like can't move. You can't move a muscle. Like, because if you do, you just killed basically a whole country worth of people. That's
And
disturbing.
some additional context on the world that Petrov was living in. Just that March 8th of 1983, Boomer, we got to talk about our boy Ronald Reagan. Our boy Ronald Reagan. You know, one of the funniest things about Reagan, the man loved jelly beans, and man, he had this sidekick with him, and any time he wanted to make a decision, whether it was jelly beans or blowing up Sudan or whatever, he would consult with his astrophysicist to see whether or not this was a good idea, right? So what I'm trying to say here, totally fine. You know, like this was the dude we absolutely 1000% needed in office during the Cold War, right?
Oh yeah. Without a doubt.
So look,
Oh,
this
yeah.
date, this is a very special date. This is March 8th, 1983. We have Reagan speaking before an audience of people who are historically known to be extremely well-adjusted. He is speaking with an audience of evangelical Christians in Florida. And he describes the USSR, Russia at the time, as an evil empire to an audience that is primed to oppose disarmament policies. Is it okay if I read this quote to you real quick? So I urge you to speak out against those who would place the United States in a position of military and moral inferiority. You know, like when your is soft, inferiority. So, in your discussions of the nuclear freeze proposals, I urge you to beware of the temptation of pride, the temptation of declaring yourselves above it all, and to label both sides equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, and to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil. What do you think of that quote?
It's very much like he's looking through a lens where it's a very red lens, and anything you happen to be looking in that moment is all just covered in red. And I very much think he was looking to the east with this lens, specifically at Russia, and thought to himself, yep, they're evil. That's the root of all evil. They're going to fuck everything up for the rest of us over here in the United States. We are literally the rest of the world, and it's they, them, or well, an us, them type of situation. But the reality is we're all in the same boat. An ordinary person living in Russia is probably thinking the same exact thing as an ordinary person in the United States, which is basically, holy shit, I hope these numbskulls that make these decisions don't kill us all. Because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Is it's an us them. It's political, or it's politics, and it's using. I
mean, you know, Reagan is really bypassing that personal level you're referring to, right? I mean, he's omitting a lot here, and you know, real quick, I don't want to, you know, dismiss some of the things that the USSR did as a political power, as a country. Look, Russia did bad things to people. This is indisputable, but by that same virtue, the U.S. also hasn't strictly had the best track record with human rights. And what Reagan is doing in that speech, he is basically drawing a line of like moral superiority. And I don't think that comparison was apt. That's what he's doing in his rhetoric, at least.
Yeah, because you want to convince your populace that your country and everything that they're doing is right, and everything that another country is doing is wrong, so that you can justify your actions, regardless of whether those actions truly are moral or are the right logical thing to do. It's political. It's perhaps abusive.
One might
Call it what
argue
you will,
such,
but it's certainly,
But we're
certainly not what you would expect from a world leader.
now,
To put
by
it
the way,
bluntly.
I'm contractually obligated to simp for Australia. That country is actually perfect. Famously, Australia has never done anything
course.
wrong ever. That is the perfect country, and we should all try to be more and more like them. With each passing moment. But, regardless, on March 23rd, Reagan takes his rhetoric and he kind of escalates it a little bit. So, Boomer, have you ever heard of the Star Wars project?
I don't believe I have.
It was
no.
released in 2017, and it did mass. Oh, wait a minute, this is not The Last Jedi. I'm so sorry. Reagan. on March 23rd, Reagan announced what would soon become known in the common lexicon as the Star Wars project, but was actually called the Strategic Defense Initiative. On paper, it was supposed to be a satellite that could blow up ICBMs from midair. I want to say RoboCop actually does like a little joke segment about this where the SDI satellite ends up like blowing up Greece or something. It's been a minute since I've seen it. But what you need to know is this was basically vaporware. Really, SDI's only accomplishment was it actually threatened the idea of mutually assured destruction, right? Which, from a game theory is based on the idea that both parties are equal. They have the equal ability to nuke each other back to the Stone Age. And therefore, because we both know how this is going to end, we're not going to act on it, right? So SDI on paper and, in theory, and to the Russians, they are very, very, very concerned about this. They're very scared about this. They view SDI as a very legitimate threat to their national security, right? And even worse is what happens on September 1st, 1983. Hey, Boomer, when was the last time you took a flight?
Oh, it was months ago.
Yeah, well, I reckon, actually just curious, man, but how did you feel on this flight?
Oh, it wasn't too bad. Very sleepy. My neck hurt and my knees hurt. But, what else is new when you fly?
Right. So on September 1st, 1983, there are 269 souls on board, counting passengers, crew, and the captain, right? And I reckon some of these folks were probably feeling a little bit uncomfortable on their flight even before this happened, but due to a communications system error, this plane, KAL, Korean Airlines Flight 007, which is flying out of JFK and over to Seoul, South Korea, over Russia, they lack communications. They cannot talk to people. Regardless,
All right.
as they are flying over the USSR, they are unable to receive communications from Soviet ground control telling them to divert, and who are basically warning them, hey, if you don't knock this off, we're going to blow you up. At this point, the Soviets believe that this plane is something similar to like a B-52 bomber. And they believe that if they do not shoot down this plane, a whole lot of people are going to die. So that's exactly what Russia does. The USSR, again, fearing this first strike, they shoot it down and they kill everyone on board.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is 1 year before Threads comes out on the TV in the UK. And I would say the last big event that's kind of, thrown around by Thrower and mentioned by him as something that sort of added to this like miasma of fear and paranoia was Able Archer, which I don't want to go too much into Able Archer because this is a huge rabbit hole. It's very complicated. All you need to know is Able Archer was a North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. It was a NATO war game that was, I believe, being held in Germany at the time. Forgive me if I don't want to go into a whole lot of details about this. Again, this is a really, really long story. There's a really wonderful podcast called Snafu that's hosted by the delightful Ed Helms, and they do a whole season just on Able Archer. The point is, much like Petrov, we have a real misinterpretation, right? Where the Soviets think, oh shit, this is it. This is it. They're going to smack us. They're going to hit us. Holy shit. And thankfully, again, much like Petrov's story, smarter heads prevail. And escalation is just barely, just barely avoided, really.
Well, thank God. And that specific event, I believe they talk about that in Threads, don't they? Like I remember a news broadcast where they're talking about a flight getting shot down over Russia. And this is right before where the fictional part of the movie comes in, where it does escalate. Whereas, as we know, like you said, it thankfully did not escalate. But I think that event is where the movie kind of picks up and elaborates. All right, well, if this did escalate, where would things go?
Yeah, so
right?
like I said, this was a BBC production. I'm sure that Mick Jackson had access to a lot of different reporting that was going on, and the whole I guess a big through line in how Threads was made. It had a lot of community involvement. This movie was made by begging, stealing, and borrowing, in I think the best, most creative way. So it wouldn't surprise me, Boomer, if a lot of these events, there was actually like news footage that was lifted and interpreted in a fictional manner.
Yeah, I mean, I think it played very well to the movie. It just made it that much more realistic and believable. So I'm glad they did that.
Again, reading the making of documents of this film is just so chilling. In fact, I think, and this is probably where I'll cap off the history lesson for today. So Margaret Thatcher, the famous milk snatcher, I'm sorry, I couldn't hesitate throwing in that line. Margaret Thatcher acted to dissolve funding that paid for a children's milk program throughout the UK. Hence why she's called the Milk Snatcher. Any one of you who have heard a very specific song might know of another lyric that has been replaced, but that's neither here nor there. Regardless, Thatcher had a go speech ready to show to the public in the event that the Cold War were to escalate. I'm going to read that for you now. Whatever terrors lie in wait for us all, the qualities that have helped us to keep our freedom intact twice already during this sad century will be our strength. It is the close bond of family life that must be our greatest defense against the unknown.
If families remain united and resolute, giving shelter to those living alone and unprotected, our country's will to survive cannot be broken. As we strive together to fight off the new evil, let us pray for our country and the men of goodwill wherever they may be. God bless you all.
Wow. I don't think I ever wanted to hear that speech, but there it is. It was a real thing. Not broadcast, but still.
Yeah. Yeah. So, again, one thing that I do think is curious about this speech is the emphasis on family values. And, how are family values reflected in this movie, Boomer?
Well, you see a lot of sticking together, right? Throughout the movie, the family is more the various families that are featured are in it together and they're helping each other out, or like there's an older couple and I believe like a beam falls on the one and the other that's able to stand runs over and is trying to help their spouse out from under the beam, and then it just kind of cuts away from that, showing inevitably they probably didn't make it. Like there was no one else around to help them. They are just stuck and they just kind of faded out, and that's very disturbing. So family values, yeah, you're with your family and you help each other out,
and you don't.
and ultimately,
and then you don't.
What? And then you don't.
I mean, honestly, man, I think you can almost draw on a graph the concentration of family values in this movie and how they start steadily disappearing from the movie after like the halfway point.
Oh, I see what you're getting at. I mean, okay, yeah, family values. So like, you shall not steal, you shall be kind to your neighbor, and all that kind of shit. Yeah, no, that went out the door as soon as the bomb went off. That went out the door before the bomb went off, I'd say. It's ironic, yeah, that Margaret Thatcher uses the word family values, and well, in the movie, you're right. You don't really get family values. You get a lot of pretty poor human behavior, and well, that's just it. How do humans behave at the end
actually,
of the world?
Boomer, one thing that you did mention to me as well watching this film, you pointed out that there is a mural in this film advertising life insurance. Why did you find that funny?
Well, it's ironic because, it's ironic for really two reasons. The first reason is that everybody is dead in this movie. So, you could make a lot of money if you capitalize on all those dead people's life insurance. But the double irony comes in because all the businesses that would have administered these life insurances have been blown to smithereens. So even if you wanted to collect life insurance, it wouldn't even matter anyway.
Those policies are void.
So yeah, they are very much void. Yeah. Oh my God, that was a pretty clever shot.
I mean, there's not a lot of humor in this movie, and I think that's one thing that stood out to me about that scene is that I don't know if it's just me, but I did think it was funny.
It was funny. I think that was intentional. Just a little bit of comedic relief.
And again, this movie it never it starts bleak and then it just gets bleaker.
Yeah, it really doesn't get any better. It gets, it just kind of gets worse and worse. It's like it starts off kind of steady and then starts to rise and then just goes straight up and then starts to peak out a little bit and plateau. And it just doesn't get better, though, before the movie ends. I mean, it does seem somewhat hopeful that maybe society could carry on, but it's not looking too good. It's basically medieval humans,
Yeah.
and yet somehow
You
worse
know,
than
at
that.
one point, the narrator states that the population of the entire world goes back to medieval levels. I mean, how fair of an estimate do you think that is for this movie?
I mean, it's tough to say because we know that most of Britain is taken out in at least in the movie. Most of Britain is taken out, so you can't really say, like, assuming the population of the world is at what, like 13 trillion or something in that range. I who knows what it would really be, and if there was a nuclear war, what countries would take the brunt of it. I imagine, like the US, the UK, Russia, and some other hot spots around the globe. But I would say more than half of the global population would just vaporize as a result of the nuclear war. At least half. That's my estimate. Not that that's educated by any means, but that's what I would say.
If only.
And it says in the movie medieval levels, so I know the population wasn't exactly big in the medieval days, especially due to the plague and whatnot, and wiping out a huge population of people. Like, yeah, I would have to say medieval levels isn't exactly far off.
If only there was like this country that was on like the, if America's up here, if only there was like this country that was like way down there. You know what I mean?
Huh. You mean a land down under?
Yeah, something like that.
If only. Maybe we could all just go there.
That sure would be cool.
Live.
Hint, hint, hint.
Explore the reef.
Please, we need sponsors.
The Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah, but
We need Brondo.
yes, son. We need to mutilate
The
some
new sports drink. The thirst mutilator.
But I mean, speaking of characters who like walked out of this movie, I think the narrator left to go get some Brondo and just never returned. What do you think of the narrator ghosting the audience in threads?
Well, it's kind of I would call it a literary device in that the narrator was the kind of part of what made this movie a cross between a normal narrative and a documentary. But after the nuclear hellfire sweeps across Britain, we really just don't hear from the narrator, except maybe at one point toward the end to say something about what's going on. So it's almost as if we have all this stuff going on, all these voices, and by the end, it's very quiet. You don't hear much. You just maybe the sound of wind or the sound of leaves being fluttered and a piece of wood falling over, and that's it. And then it's empty. It's the feeling of emptiness and scarcity and hopelessness. And the fact that the narrator just kind of stops most certainly contributes to that
Dude,
fact.
that guy took 5 minutes for a smoke break and he just never came back. He just
Nope.
f***ing walked off set and was like, goodbye, deuces, and just poof.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But dude, I suppose we're winding down this episode. We're almost there. And I just have one more pressing question. Jimmy and Ruth. Do you think their marriage was doomed even before the nuclear bombs dropped?
Yeah, I mean, look, they were teenagers messing around.
I mean, a little bit older
and I
than
don't think
teenagers,
they...
but like, how old were these people, do you think?
Well, they were probably in their 20s,
Yeah.
right? Like early 20s at the most. So I don't know. I don't think they really knew what they were getting into. I'm not saying they didn't have a bright future ahead of them. It's not really clear where they're going in this movie, but you know, I it's it's always tough to say in these situations, but um, it certainly didn't seem like well, okay. I know the boy Michael was saying to his parents that he wanted to take care after getting the girl pregnant, wanted to take care and do the honorable thing, and he was making this claim. But was he really going to stick through when things got tough and when it really came down to the wire? I mean, who knows? Obviously, they didn't stick together in the end. Everyone
They
just
did
kind of
not.
scattered and
They certainly
got
did
lost.
not. I'll actually do you one better. Do you believe in the butterfly effect? Yes.
Yeah. I think in the concept.
I really think that if this dude Jimmy, I think if he and Ruth had just used a condom, I don't think this nuclear exchange would have happened.
Yeah, I mean that's entirely
Yes.
possible. I think contraceptives could have saved
I
the world
really
in this
do.
movie. You know, if anything, this is just a glorified
Yeah.
ad for condoms. Like they should have rubbered up, and then they could have saved all
Yeah.
of the world. They could have prevented
look,
nuclear hellfire.
It's
a
the
shame,
one time
actually.
you don't use a condom that you doom the rest of the world to nuclear hellscape.
You better rubber up. Now at your local
Okay.
grocery store.
So, with that being said, do we have any closing thoughts on Threads?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say I appreciate the historical context overview because I feel like that really is important to understand all of that because of how it influenced the making of the film. So now that we know the historical context, I mean, look, it just goes to show how people were feeling at this time and the politics and how that was influencing what was happening and the general consensus at the time and the way we look upon the leaders and the people that were in government at that time with a less ideal, or I guess a less than positive.
Are you referring to
lens,
Margaret Thatcher,
right?
the snatcher?
I may be, but then again, I may not be. No, I am most definitely referring to the milk snatcher and Reagan and all of them. I mean, at the time, people thought what they did, and it was perhaps controversial. But now we kind of look at those political figures with a less than ideal view, and it just kind of makes you think. Well, here we are in 2025. We are seeing a certain, I'll say a certain trend, right, in politics that kind of alludes to that era that this movie is taking place during. And are we essentially still in that same timeline, just all these years later? Nothing's really changed. We're just experiencing the same thing that the characters in this movie did, and it's all just escalating up toward some big outbreak of whether it be nuclear war or some other pandemic or who knows what. But it just leaves one to wonder if anything's really changed since the year 1984.
Well,
That's what I think.
Boomer, as someone who also uses Discord, I've been told that anytime there's a mod in the chat, that it's literally 1984. Literally.
Well,
Yeah.
there we have
But
it.
that being said, I think that's a wonderful question. And I think that we will maybe address that question in our grand finale to Nuclear Kino when we review The Hills Have Eyes from 2006. That's the Alexander Aja directed movie. I'm really looking forward to that. And funny enough, that actually it dovetails nicely into both Nuclear Kino as well as our review on Piranha 3D, same director. So I think that's going to be a really, really fun review to listen to.
It'll be a hoot, as the kids say.
And it might even be a holler. This has been the This has been the Bonus Situation podcast. That's our sode. We're out of here.
Bonus Situation out.
I think we ought to discuss the bonus situation.
Right.